Magnus has only made one move, but he has only 31 seconds on his clock, while his opponent has nearly 3 minutes. But how did this happen? Apparently, Magnus was late for his game, so Arbiter decided to start the round without him, even though Magnus's opponent was unhappy with this decision. Can Magnus win with only 30 seconds on his clock? Players start their game with French opening. In this position, most popular White's moves are either d5 or developing the knight. But Kovalev takes the pawn on d5. This is already an unusual decision on Grandmaster level. Magnus takes back. White develops their knight, and Black develops their bishop. Here Kovalev thinks for several seconds and plays c4. Magnus immediately answers with knight to f6. But here a strange thing happens. Kovalev isn't moving. Here he glances at Magnus. And he does it again, and for the third time. Clearly, the Grandmaster knows what is the best move in this position. Then why is he waiting? Well, sometimes, when their opponent is late for the game, some Grandmasters show their sportsmanship and just burn their clock until the time situation is equal. So Kovalev makes his next move when he has 2 minutes on the clock, and his next move after another 40 seconds. Magnus checks White's king with his rook, and Kovalev blocks with his bishop. But look at what Magnus does now. He spares 2 seconds to adjust his pieces before pressing the clock, showing extreme level of confidence. And a move later, he does it again. Kovalev moves his rook to e1, and Magnus attacks the pawn with his knight. White plays knight to e5, and Black grabs the pawn. Bishop to f3. Now both players are almost equal on the clock, so the real game begins. Black defends their knight with c6. White activate their queen, and Black does the same. Now a big trade of pieces happens, and players go to an endgame. Kovalev develops his bishop, and Magnus attacks the knight. White brings it back, and Black trades the rooks on e1. Magnus activates his rook, and Kovalev defends his pawn with a bishop. After bishop to f5 and knight to e1, Magnus misses the best move. Here, after b5, Black has an advantage, but Magnus plays king to f7 instead. a3 and b5. Kovalev moves his rook to c-file, and Magnus does the same thing. Here, Kovalev makes a huge blunder with rook to d1. Now Magnus can win a pawn with bishop takes a3. But he misses this idea and plays b4. Players trade on b4 square. Now Magnus has a small advantage, but this game is very likely going to end in a draw. Kovalev defends both pawns. And now Magnus starts to take space on a king's side. Kovalev plays g3, and opponents trade their pawns. Now both players just shuffle their pieces as position is completely equal. But 14 moves later, they reach this position, and Kovalev cracks first. After knight to f5, the game would probably end in a draw, but Kovalev takes the bishop. Magnus recaptures, and now d5. The problem in White's position is that their pawns are weak. Magnus goes for the f3 pawn. After rook to d4, he checks White's king and grabs the pawn. Kovalev takes on c4, but Magnus takes on d5. Now Magnus is just a pawn up, so the game is practically over. Players shuffle their pieces and finally trade g for b pawn. Magnus checks the king and pushes his pawn. Now he pushes the f pawn, and after b4 and rook to b2, Kovalev resigns. It is just impossible to stop Black's pawns. Evidently, Magnus can win even with only 30 seconds, but we still have to show our respect for Kovalev's sportsmanship.